Hello, everyone. My name is Conrad on behalf of CameraStuff. Hope you are doing pleasantly well, and thank you for joining yet another episode of In the Limelight. So, the point of this show is we look into the South African photographic industry and we find some interesting people to talk to. One such person today is Wayde Flowerday, who is a music event live photographer. I don't know what the official term is. We can ask him in a moment. We featured Wayde not too long ago as a camera stuff photographer of the week, and he gave some interesting answers. And we thought, yeah, might as well get him on the show and see what he has to say about the local scene and where it is going in the near future. So I think, without further ado, let's invite our guest in, shall we? Press the button and hello, Wayde. How you doing?
Hey, well in yourself, Conrad. How's it?
I'm doing very, very well, thank you. What have you been up to today?
Dude, not a ton. I'm just working the normal day job and then trying to wrap my head around not embarrassing myself on your show live. So
Okay, cool. Well, it's
there's that.
embarrassment always makes things interesting, so don't beat yourself up. Yeah, we want to keep things natural and organic here.
Yeah, absolutely. And my wife already told me, don't worry, no one knows who you are or cares who you are. So I mean, that's also a good
That's
start. I mean, inspiration straight from the heart. So no, I mean, it's wonderful.
that's actually good advice. I mean, often when I do these lives, I always forget to say something or forget to mention something, but obviously people watching don't know that, so it's
Sure.
something not to beat yourself up with. Yep. So we're going to ask a bunch of questions, and obviously get into your career as a music photographer and kind of suss out how things got started and where you are today, and obviously where you're going in the near future. All right. So as usual, everybody out there in Facebook land and YouTube land, if you have any questions to ask, please do drop them in the comment section. We'll see them in the right-hand corner here. So we're going to keep things nice and chatty. Also, if you are watching, please do introduce yourself. Tell me where you're from, and I'll do a little bit of a shout out here. Okay, Wayde, you ready?
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right. So first question, as per normal, is it's a two-parter. How did you get into photography per se? And secondly, how did you get into music photography?
Okay, so I think the music. Let's start with how the music industry thing came to be to begin with. Growing up, raised on rock and roll, my parents listened to a lot of it. Then followed the
Mhm.
typical progression of a kid born in the '90s. Got into Linkin Park, got into slightly heavier stuff, your metals,
Mhm.
whatever. So I fell in love with that. Blunt magazine at the time was also a huge source of inspiration, which is where I found a lot of the local bands. So ended up going to shows, fell in love with the
I'm
industry.
getting
So
flashbacks now of Blunt magazine. You mentioned it's a little locket of memory that just unlocked in my brain.
absolutely. So I think that sparked a lifelong affinity for the
Mm.
South African music industry. Um, as a result, when I was at university, I was busy with my maths degree, so I didn't have a lot of time to do anything creative. And Music Review at the time was a large publication, so they had a
Mm.
call for writers. I'd always enjoyed writing, so I thought, let me dabble in music journalism and give that a bash.
Mm.
Did that for a couple of years, had a great time, got a lot of interesting experiences out of it, got to do a lot of interviews with some really cool people, some awesome event reviews, that type of thing. And then ended up writing a thesis for my PhD. So all the joy of
Mhm.
writing was gone in an instant, type of thing.
Yeah.
And I suddenly realized now that I still want to be involved in the industry, but I'm not enjoying the writing aspect anymore.
Mm.
I've already made a ton of connections with people within the industry, including all the photographers, because as media, we all congregated together. So I already
Mm.
had that network in place. So I decided to buy a camera. And then a lot of my good friends that were photographers there at the time coached me through how to shoot. So I didn't start off on auto mode and sitting in the pit struggling like that. They threw me in the deep end, threw me onto manual, and yeah,
Mhm.
well, here we are today. That's the story in a nutshell.
All right. Okay. So, what gear did you start off with, and what gear do you use now?
Okay, so the first thing I bought was a Nikon D7000 with two
Mhm.
kit lenses. Um, Worked fairly well for its time. The kit lenses not so much, especially with the variable aperture.
Nah.
But I made the jump to Fuji's mirrorless systems about 3 years ago now. So yeah, I'm
Mhm.
busy running XT4 and two XT3s, along with the trinity of zooms, all f2.8 throughout, which obviously for concert and event photography, it's essential, right? You
Mm.
need that for low light. And Fuji's performance has just been unparalleled for me. So yeah, there's no looking back at this point in time.
I think a lot of Fuji guys and women in the comments will be very happy with that. Yeah, so I also started doing music photography when I decided to do photography. And back then it was a little 2 megapixel compact camera. You went to their bands and the shows, etc. My memory of which are not very reliable at this point. But I want to ask you, like, what particular challenges did you face getting into music photography, and how did you learn to overcome them?
So challenges in getting into it, not a ton. Fortunately, I mean, if we talk just in terms about getting access or getting into it, fortunately, having come from the music journo background, I already had a lot of the networking in place. If we're talking about obstacles in the sense of actually just shooting a show, I mean, that's a whole other kettle of fish. I mean, from venues with no lights to venues that have stages that are far too high. I'm relatively tall, and often you come across a stage that is still higher than me, and a pit that is about yay wide. So you're pretty much shooting an angle like this. I'd love to say there's a one size fits all solution to these problems, but pretty much I think it's often been a case of trial and error, and just having to make sacrifices on occasion. I mean, personally, I like to shoot at f4 pretty much for every show. I want to make sure that when I'm capturing a jump shot or an action shot, that everything's tack sharp. I don't have the foot dangling, but occasionally you have to drop to 2.8 and just have that foot dangling. It's just got to be one of those things. Occasionally you have to whip out a longer lens and go and hide behind the crowd and shoot from as far back as possible. And yeah, you buy weather sealed gear because the guy standing next to you is on his 12th brandy and coke, and he's more than willing to spill it on you. I mean,
of course,
yeah.
yes.
So there's always obstacles. It's a very wild environment at the best of times. So yeah, anything can happen, and most often things are going to happen.
Yeah, so I suppose adaptability and learning as you go along, building that experience, and obviously taking that with you for the ride. It's not going to start off perfect. It's probably not perfect even after a few years. But yeah, little bit by little bit helps, and you take the strengths and you weed out the weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I'm thinking back now. I think it was last year or the year prior. Veyfelt is a venue or was a venue in Pretoria, and I was shooting one of Francois Van Koch's shows there, and he wanted to grab a shot where he jumped right in front of my lens. I had the wide angle on, and have one of those iconic jump shots. And I think we repeated that about 4 times during the show, because as he would jump, the strobe would kick in and there'd be zero light on stage. So you'd look at me and I'd shake my head as like, no. We did that 3 more times, and eventually on the final one, the light had stayed on for the jump. So yeah, adaptability, but also once you become a bit more fay with the artists, you get to know the guys a bit better, whoever you're working with. It does help a lot as well, and it helps you capture moments a bit easier.
All right. So you said building those connections is something that you did early on, but somebody getting into the industry, how do you go about approaching bands and working with them and building that rapport with them?
So, I mean, from the get-go, it's probably going to be a case of you need to just go to as many shows as possible. Odds are you're not going to get paid. That's definitely off the table. Starting out the gate, you might not even be able to get placed on the media list because you haven't demonstrated that what you're generating is of enough value to anyone yet. So you pay your entrance, and consequently, you pay your dues. You shoot all the bands, shoot as many bands as possible, put all the images out there, tag them in them, do whatever you can to try and get their attention. And that's how you start generating these networks. And the next time you shoot said band, you go and introduce yourself again and say, hey, I took these photos of you at X event, and that's how you start this reciprocal relationship. I'm not saying it's easy. It does take a little bit of self-confidence to do, but it's a bullet that you're going to have to bite if you want to do it.
Okay, makes sense. So you mentioned Francois Van Koch earlier. Speaking of which, I just want to show the people what you get up to. Yeah, just to show some of your work.
So that's Regan
this.
flying through the sky. He's from Facing the Gallows. Man is superhuman. I don't know how he attains heights like that.
Yeah, it's always pleasant to work with incredibly dynamic people, especially when it comes to music. I just wanted to show people just a few of your photos, just to get people warmed up as to what you're capable of. But yeah, fantastic photos all round, something that you can be incredibly proud of. Something that
Thank you.
grabbed our attention, and yeah, here you are having a little conversation with us. But yeah, just to give people an idea as to what you do, fantastic results all around. All right, so we'll talk about these images one by one in a little bit. But
Sure.
yeah, we still want to get to know you more a little bit. Okay, so how do you go about this? Is something I've learned very early on as a music photographer. Yeah, it's kind of something I got out of eventually, but understanding the music, obviously knowing the music, knowing when the beats are going to drop, and also getting familiar with the lighting. Yeah, familiarizing yourself with everything that's going on. Obviously, it helps you to stay one step ahead. I suspect you'll obviously agree with that, but is there anything that you want to add to it?
No, I mean you're 100% right. It's actually become a bit of a running joke in my, or at least to myself. I'll catch myself with certain bands because I know the set list so well. So if I put a song on in the car, the next song I'm already singing is not the next song on the album necessarily. It's often the next song that would be in a set list. And often I'll catch myself thinking, okay, band members going to jump during this part of the song. They're going to do this during this part of the song. So yeah, you become quite familiar with the set list and a bit of the stage routine. Becoming familiar with the lighting, that's not a thing. Not really.
All right. This,
Maybe at
good.
a particular venue, sure, but
Mhm.
the lighting doesn't follow a particular band in any which way.
All right. Okay. Any memorable moments from your career, and why they stood out to you?
So, I mean, again, going back to this whole thing about being a 90s kid reading Blunt a lot, I mean, I idolized a lot of our local bands growing up, Focal Police, The Narrow, etc. So, having getting to work with people like that has been extremely memorable for me, especially capturing some of their notable tours. Francois van Coke and Frinde, Focal's birthdays in
Mhm.
recent years, The Narrow's birthdays, that type of thing has been incredible. But then even doing official work for some of the bands that have toured here, like Seether, Atreyu, those were bands that had a huge influence on me and I still listen to this day. So that's absolutely massive for me. And then obviously I can't omit the larger festivals. I mean, there is something to it. I mean, getting on a stage and taking a photo and there's 10,000, 15,000 people ahead of you, like Lift the Betty Done, for instance. Um, it really is if you take a step back, it's a little bit overwhelming at times. You don't
Mhm.
realize the position you're standing in. It really, really is memorable and really iconic to get to do that type of thing. So yeah, I'm forever grateful that I get to be in the space, and I'm still grateful that I love doing what I do in the space.
All right. I think you mentioned a couple already, but my next question is, what are your three biggest achievements thus far?
I think I think I've already touched on quite a bit of that, but yeah. So I suppose getting to work with the bands I idolize, I think that would be top of mind, biggest achievement for me, and getting to document a large part of their history. Sure, it wasn't there in the beginning, but in the beginning we had people like Sean Brunt and Liam Lynch, and Liam's still doing incredible work this day. So to get to work even alongside people like him is incredible. Getting to shoot internationals, having a lot of the international bands use your images to say, thanks South Africa, we're out, or to promote their next show elsewhere in the world is also an incredible feeling. Knowing that these people know who you are or that they've seen your work is truly amazing.
Absolutely.
And then again, just often I'm taken aback where if I'm at a show, get tapped on the shoulder by someone that just wants to greet me and say that they like my work, and I don't know the person from a bar of soap. They're completely random. Yeah, and that's a little bewildering and quite humbling at times as well. So I mean that's always very gratifying.
Yeah, perhaps not to the same extent, but when I do my workshops or tours as well, people tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, Conrad, I know you," and I'd never met this person before, but we spoke on Facebook, but I don't recognize this person. So I've started telling people to wear their profile picture on the T-shirt or something, so I can recognize everyone, because that's how I know people. It's just broadly on social media. Seeing all of these lots in person, it's it's very humbling, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's a
Absolutely.
great step in the right direction as well. As when
Yeah.
people recognize your work, and it's something you can't ever take for granted.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I think each niche or area of photography is very different. But I think particularly in the music space, it's not an area you're typically going to earn a living off of, right? Not a decent one anyway. And that's worldwide, let alone just in South Africa. So things like recognition, things like that are probably worth more than anything else. So yeah, that's always extremely humbling.
We spoke off air about social media, so I'm throwing a bit of attention at you now that I brought it up.
Yeah,
Things are getting interesting on social media. So I see you're posting like memes and whatnot, and it seems to be the trend that you need to add a bit of your personality into your portfolio as well. It's going to upset a lot of people, but that seems to be, what the algorithm demands.
yep.
Like social media is not what it used to be in terms of just settling a portfolio for somebody to look at. It's like very, very difficult to get that images out there. So, how do you go about approaching social media nowadays?
Nowadays, right at the moment, it's a bit of a learning curve for me. I never thought I'd reach the point where I'm starting to feel like I'm too old for social media because I don't understand how half the stuff works. So yeah, I'm asking younger people in the music industry, like that are doing these reels and all this other stuff, like how on earth are you going about this? I mean, even when you made one of them, I was like, how did you do that? I have no idea. I just post photos on Instagram and I'm done. That's typically it. But yeah, you're right. The algorithm is dictating what we need to be doing. Otherwise, it stunts your reach. I mean,
Yeah.
it's absolutely insane. Um, at the same time, now though, now that you bring it up and you're saying your personality needs to bleed through, I suppose in my personal aspect in terms of Facebook, I'm fairly well known for being a bit of a troll and just posting absolute
Good.
inane nonsense. So letting
Uh-huh.
that bleed through into something else is not the hardest thing to do. Um, I think it's just letting go of the reins and allowing yourself to realize that, okay, maybe Instagram isn't your portfolio. That's what your website's for, right? So your Instagram can be an even mix of the two.
Yeah, it's about adaptability, as what we mentioned earlier, and it's
Yeah.
not something that makes everybody happy. Obviously, it's not making me happy. Like I just wanted a portfolio and share photos with people, but now adding that personal touch, and you need to be in front of the camera as well. This is why I started doing photography, is to be behind the camera. But now
And
you
I'm
have to
sticking to that.
be in
I
front of it.
mean, yeah, this interview is enough, right? I mean, I'm behind the camera,
Well, I'm
so
happy.
no, I'm not going to start filming myself and uploading that. I don't think that day is ever going to come.
All right, so no TikTok dances as of yet.
No, also, there's a reason I do music photography and did music journalism. I have zero rhythm, zero musical ability. There will be no dancing whatsoever.
All right. All right. Michael Allen in the comments saying, good to see this, Wade.
Hey, Mikey,
All
how
right.
are you, bud?
All right. So we have a fantastic crowd watching. A lot of people watching, but please do drop comments in the comment section, guys. Let's keep this chat going. And introduce yourself as well. Tell me your name. Obviously, that will pop up, but tell me where you're from as well. So it's the reason why we do this live is to interact with you guys. So give us a bit of a commotion in the comment section. I'm certain Wade will appreciate that, and I'll appreciate that. Okay, so I think what we can do now is get into your slideshow.
Sure.
So if you want to talk about these images one by one, I have some questions to ask from my side as well, but this is basically a section of the show where we give you the reins and you kind of take over and talk about your work. So you ready?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay, let's do it. It's going to hide the comments.
So,
Right.
I mean, having seen the show before, I know people typically talk about the technical aspect of the shot. I'm going to be lying if I said I could remember exactly what settings I'm using in each photo, because as we discussed earlier on, everything changes on a dime. You're adjusting settings on the fly, right? So, without pulling up the metadata, I can't tell you exactly what's going on here. So this is Facing the Gallows. This was taken at Sonage, which is a great venue here in Johannesburg. And yeah, they have some of the most incredible lighting at the back of the stage. It always makes for an interesting photo. And yeah, Regan, he is the newer vocalist Facing the Gallows. He replaced quite a small little guy named Brian Bitterman. And yeah, it took Regan a while to start jumping. And then eventually when he did, it just didn't stop. And now, I mean, yeah, if you go look at the meme I posted on Instagram, Regan is the final one, and the way he jumps is just like a rocket take. The amount of times I've tried to grab a jump shot of Regan and he's actually cleared my frame is absolutely insane. So
Perhaps
yeah,
need a fisheye lens then.
this is shot at 8 mil. I mean, this is
Oh, okay,
and he's still clearing. He's still clearing the
okay.
frame. I mean, so yeah, no, it's absolutely nuts. So yeah, this is facing the gallows. One of my favorite shots, seeing Regan in action.
Yeah, I should get into the Olympics by the sounds of things. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
very, very fantastic looking stage here. Like I can't help but think of, you probably have experience of this as well. The stage with one light source and it's a take a lot smoke machine in a corner and the camera can't focus on anything. It focuses on the
Yes.
smoke. Yeah, little experiences here and there, but just yeah, Paul's character, I suppose.
I mean, yeah, I mean, so barring the one light aspect, which I mean, yeah, that's hard enough. I've done a couple of venues that are outdoors, there's no roof, and then there's still one light. So the idea of trying to use a flash to try and bounce off something to try and save you, even that is just not going to happen. So yeah, having a venue with fantastic lighting is always going to be a godsend.
Speaking of which, you mentioned a flash. So, what is it, and how do you go about using a flash at a venue?
Okay, so I'm using from your shop, incidentally, the
Oh,
Godox
thanks.
860s,
Mhm.
the Fuji ones.
Right.
And typically, I prefer a bounce flash. I mean, other photographers may disagree. I've seen a lot of guys get fantastic results using the flash head on and getting really creative. My personal thing is to have um, bounce flash, having the light fall off, creates a more natural looking image for me, which I like. I don't like doing a lot of post processing. I don't like doing a lot of artsy stuff with my photos. I try to go more for a photojournalist feel.
Yeah, makes
Almost
sense.
so, I want to try and represent what the crowd saw at the end of the day. By getting super creative with it and trying to rebalance everything, I don't feel that's a true reflection of what happened at the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Making a little bit too funky is not depicting what actually happened at the day and kind of provides a false impression as to what people might get into if it's their first show.
Correct. Yeah.
All right, so we've got a question from the audience, a couple of
hmm
questions actually. So, Michael, what made you switch from Nikon to Fuji, and what what do you like about your Fujis?
Okay, so the initial switch, it was gradual. So my wife got me an XT4 for my 30th because I wanted something a bit smaller. I mean, I was running around with the D750 as my main body with the battery grip attached to it, the Nikon. And that thing felt like a concrete block. I mean, you
Yeah.
could beat someone in the crowd if they were in your way, and the camera would sustain no damage. So I wanted something a bit smaller that I could possibly carry around, start using it more in day-to-day life. Because honestly, outside of shows, I actually don't use my cameras all that much. Then COVID struck, so I actually didn't get to play with the camera all that much. Eventually, once COVID was lifted, I went to a show fully anticipating that I was going to be using my Nikons as the main bodies for the day because I was used to them, and I just popped the Fuji in the bag with its kit lens just to test it out for fun. And I think after about 5 shots with it, just seeing the colors that the Fuji was pulling, I packed the Nikons away and I spent the rest of the day shooting with the Fuji, even with the kit lens. So yeah, that's honestly what sold me immediately. And there is some, listen, I mean, it works for the daytime shows where you can see your white balance in live view and all that type of thing. It's
Yes.
very helpful. At night, obviously in the pitch black, you have to turn that off. It's not going to help you much for your nighttime shows, your club shows. But yeah, I think it was just exciting having coming from the Nikon full frame that did none of that. So I think I was just sucked into the tech, and then I just loved the way that Fuji dealt with colors, and yeah, its color palette is just phenomenal.
Yeah, the color science is something the Fuji people
Mm.
like to talk about, and yeah, with good reasons. Very, very good color that you get from the Fujis as well, and probably save a lot on chiropractor bills in the future as well. Because I have a Pentax, it's very similar to the D70. It's a heavy, chunky camera that with the lenses attached to it as well. And I do studio shoots, so I can't imagine what it's like doing an entire event with a big
Yeah, I
chunky
mean, when I
camera
was
like that.
carrying the 750 with its battery grip and a 70-200 mm lens, I mean, at the time it felt normal, but now when I pick that type of rig up, it just feels like I'm trying to do weightlifting at an Olympic level in comparison to what I can do with a mirrorless system.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so a question here from Pat. How does one get to work with you? All right, so do you normally work with people, or is it a type of Batman thing where you work solo? Do you bring Robin with you, in a manner of speaking?
Well, I mean, Robin tends to be my wife. Yeah,
Oh,
Bianca
nice.
typically, she's my assistant. She'll bring what help me out on the shoots. But yeah, it is pretty much a one-man operation. I think it differs to other types of events where you might need a second shooter. If a second shooter is required, so let's look at something like Lift the Baby Dumb. We had a number of photographers that are hired for the day, but we'll all get appointed to do different things, playing to our different strengths. So I personally don't do a lot of crowd work. I don't really enjoy tapping people on the shoulder saying, "Can I take your photo?" You know, group photos of people enjoying themselves. It's not really my thing. I enjoy focusing on the stage element. So a lot of organizers will often go and source someone that specializes in that and does that particularly well. But if that's what the question about working with me meant, if it meant how do I take photos of you, DM me. We can talk about it. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, it
That's
is very much a Batman type of operation.
all right. Yeah. Speaking of which, let me quickly find your profile here. Copy. I'm gonna paste that in the comment section. So that's your Instagram. Let's see what else you got on your link tree.
Far
Okay,
too
I'll
much.
post.
Far too much. Post
I
the
see
link
so.
tree and be done with it.
I got a point there. All right, link tree in the comment section. All right, very good, Wayne. All right, so if you want to contact Wayne afterwards, obviously follow his work. Very, very funky stuff going on his Instagram in particular. Yeah, fantastic work to have a look at. And obviously, to see what Wade gets up to in the future, please do follow Wade. Go to his Instagram and do so. All right, so I think what we can do is continue with our slideshow, shall we?
Sure. This is, oh, damn it, I'm trying to remember which event this was. Now this is the con of photographing the same band multiple times. I think I've honestly lost count of how many times I've photographed Volker Police Car. So I can't remember which event this was. But yeah, this is Vainant. I mean, still the most energetic bassist you're ever going to see perform live. He's got a good 10 years on me, and I feel exhausted just watching him run up and down a stage, jumping, spitting water, spinning, doing the flying karate kicks, the whole spiel. But yeah, absolutely one of my favorite people to photograph because he's always doing something interesting, and absolutely phenomenal band just to photograph live. The energy is infectious, which is why I keep going back for more.
All right, so where would you rate Feyenoord on the jumper meter?
He came just behind Regan.
Okay, all right,
Just
still the middle
behind
then.
Regan. Yeah, well, Vainant actually told me I got it wrong earlier on today. He said it's a bit of an unfair comparison because Vainant tends to jump off of things, whereas Regan's just jumping statically from the ground. But still, full marks to Vainant for running around and jumping like he does. It's nuts.
Okay, great stuff. Okay, let's go on, shall we? All right. So tell us about this event, and I just also want to elaborate on gear, if you don't mind.
No.
So you spoke about camera and flashes, but what other essentials do you normally take with you?
Okay, so I mean, obviously, I take my. I mentioned the Trinity earlier on, so I like having my 8 to 16 on me, my 16 to 55. Those two typically live on the two bodies that I carry with me on stage. If it's an event where I know I'm going to be a bit further away, 55 to 200 or whatever the equivalent is, I often forget it. That, yeah, is also with me at all times. And if it's an event that might demand all three, that's when I carry three bodies. And that's when things start getting really crazy. But then just, I think you asked, or we were chatting just before this, and you said, what non-camera essentials do I have on me? And first one is always going to be earplugs. Especially for
Makes
new
sense.
photographers, they often look at me like I'm insane. They're like, "Why are you here? What are you doing if you don't enjoy?" It's not about that. You need earplugs, and you still hear the music just fine, but you're not going to develop hearing loss. You're not going to go home with your ears
Mhm.
ringing. You are in front of the monitors, in front of the bass bins, in front of the speakers. You're right on top of that stuff. You need to be protecting your hearing at all times. Um, and I mean, if you've looked at a couple of the photos already, you can see that typically what I tend to shoot are high energy shows. So
Mm.
it involves a lot of running around. Stage lights, if you're on stage, they get incredibly hot. And if you're in a small venue with bands this active, obviously the crowd's going to be active. So it gets very humid in there. So the other essential I carry with me is always a spare t-shirt, because there's nothing worse than getting
Mhm.
out drenched after a show and then having to drive home and
Mhm.
feeling like you're freezing to the bone.
Yeah, plus
Um,
the guy with that brandy and cokes that you mentioned as well.
that too. Yeah, that too. The branding coke with the beer down the back. Or yeah, I'm not going to go down the list of things that have landed on me. Yeah, let's not go there. But yeah, those are the typical essentials I carry, and then naturally hundreds of batteries, as many memory cards as you could find, and flash units. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Okay, makes sense. So, do you want to tell us a bit more about this image?
Okay, so this was Tequila Fest. I think this was last year's iteration. So this is
Mm.
Donnie from Spuchwolf, and Donnie has this uncharacteristic capability of not being able to stay put. And he's also just a wild performer. Always barefoot. Within the first couple of songs, he's poured iced water over his head. And next thing you know, he's in the crowd trying to climb up the highest structure you can find. Here you see
Mhm.
he's climbed a pole in the middle of the event area, um, and still carries on belting out the lyrics. I mean, it's absolutely unparalleled insanity, the way he performs. Yeah, and often they'll end up in the crowd as a collective, as the whole band, finishing out the set, playing their final song in the crowd. So again, just electrifying energy from the guys, and yeah,
Mm.
just also a great batch of guys to work with. So they're always fun to hang around and get to shoot.
All right. So, point in question: yourself as a journalist, like I say,
Hmm.
any moments that stood out to you where you thought, okay, this is going to create a legacy for this band, and you're playing just like a little tiny part in that as well with your images. So, any such moments that stood out for you?
I mean, yeah, definitely been iconic moments, I think.
Mm.
And we've gone through some of them, and some of them might still be coming up. But shooting things like Francois Van and Frinda, I think, Francois' solo journey started about 8 years ago. Roughly the same time I started shooting, he started his solo career. So I've actually been following that terribly in the beginning, naturally, because my photography was nothing to write home about back then. But I was very proud of what I was doing at the time. But that's beyond the point. To shows like he played last weekend, where you're selling out the Sunbed Arena. And I just think that type of thing is absolutely um, off the charts, from a band like Foco Politica that started off with a lot of turmoil back in the day,
Mm.
to filling out an all ages type show. Yeah, so playing a small part in that and being able to capture moments like that have been incredible. Um, Capturing Van Gogh Cartel's farewell tour, they did a series of shows. The only date I missed was Cape Town. So immortalizing that was also something that I am incredibly proud to have done. Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of moments. The Narrow's 21st birthday was this year as well, so getting to go
Mhm.
around for that, that's also great. Um, yeah, there's actually too many that I can actually, I'm struggling to wrap my head around now. If I think of something else, we'll come back to it. But yeah,
Of course, yes. Yeah, it's a small part, but it's actually a big part that you play, and you should pat yourself on the back. It's very commendable, playing your
thank you, sir.
role in capturing all of these incredible shows and also documenting bands, as you said, from point A to B, and
Yeah, I
also
mean,
tying that in with your personal journey as well.
yeah,
Stuff to be
so it
proud of,
just
man.
just thank you so much. But I mean, just to add to that, I mean, if I look now, I mean, even so, we've talked about the larger bands, but even going to the smaller bands, the up and comers, bands playing their first shows. So a band like Middle Grounds, they've just come back from
Mm,
Germany, and I went and photographed their first show. I think it was the beginning of last year. So seeing that growth is also incredible, from the first show that you photographed of theirs to seeing them on a live stream playing at Wacken, which is the biggest metal
mm,
festival in the world. I mean, yeah, so
mm.
getting to play a small part in that story is also an incredible feeling. And it's nice to be a footnote in whatever story they end up writing.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, I believe in giants, such a legend, always capture epic moments, and the nicest guy. It's a lot to pat yourself on the back with tonight, Wade.
Thank you. And I believe in Giants guys are just far too kind, and also super active bands, super fun to shoot. And yeah, if you see them on a lineup anywhere around you, definitely go catch them.
All right. Okay, let's go on with the slideshow.
Okay, so back to Francois Van Coke. So this was last year's Francois and Frenda. And yeah, just having the crowd whip out their cell phones, light up the stadium was
Mm,
something incredible. Um, we did have a similar moment this past weekend. Slightly sadder circumstances. Andrew Hu,
mm,
being an Afrikaans rapper who was diagnosed with cancer, Francois asked everyone to raise a light for her while she was fighting her battle, which unfortunately she succumbed to on Saturday,
mm,
just post the show. But yeah, that was definitely a moment that, while I know I took photos of it, I don't think a photo can truly do it the same
mm,
justice as being there and feeling that type of
mm,
moment. And same here, if you zoom in on some of these people's faces in the crowd, um, it's just a feeling you can't truly appreciate unless you are witnessing it. I don't even think video does it justice, and that's why live music is still so important and hasn't
mm,
disappeared and is still there and is going to be omnipresent. Because there's just something magical about being at a live show that you can't capture in any format. No matter how hard we try, we can do our best, but there's just something about being there in person that you cannot
um,
capture.
Well, I think you're getting close to capturing that. I think this image does speak quite a lot. So, you speak about immortalizing one's own work. Maybe a bit of a weird question, but how do you go about immortalizing your own work from your point of view? Do you print photos maybe? Do you keep it around the house? Do you often take a moment to look at your work and let the appreciation sink in? Not only in terms of what you've done recently, but kind of gauging where you were 8 years ago and seeing the progress. Because I do
Yeah.
think it's very important for people to have a look at their work and to print it, especially as well.
So I'm terrible on the printing side, if I'm honest. Because I just honestly I need to try and whittle it down. Maybe having have to send you a handful of images has helped me whittle down a couple that I might actually print. But
Mm,
um, yeah, I think my issue is I shoot fairly consistently. It's almost at least every weekend at this point in my
mm,
life, and there's each show there's something that I feel is going to be print worthy. So I should probably just get on that and actually start printing the work, and then asking my wife where I'm allowed to hang all of it. Because obviously, I mean, my taste in decor is apparently subpar. So,
yes, I know the
yeah.
film.
So I don't know. I mean, I can print all of it. I don't know where I'm going to put it. But yeah, as for the aspect about looking back on the work, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do that fairly regularly, just as a reminder of, I remember I captured a moment similar to this back when I was starting out my journey, and then just seeing the two images side by side, yeah, there's
Mm,
very little comparison. By back then standards, I was incredibly proud of the work, and I'm still proud that I caught it back then.
mm,
But not to put too fine a point on it, it's not work that I would happily put out now. Um, and I think every artist knows what that feels like to a certain
yeah.
degree. But yeah, just seeing the growth is a great feeling. Just to see it's I think it's one of the few things where there's a measurable metric that you can look back on. and actually go, wow, that's where it started. This is where it is now. And there's not too many things in life that we can actively point at and do that. So being able to do that with an art is really gratifying.
Yeah, something. I bring up this topic because we kind of touched on social media earlier, and I think social media has corrupted the way we see ourselves and the world around us. Whereas you should be comparing yourself against yourself, where you were 8 years ago, and seeing the good progress that you have done, and setting out the next 8 years or 10 years ahead of you. If you start comparing yourself to others and what followers people have and what they are putting out there. Like you also mentioned having a passion for what you do, and I think that can be corrupted if you start comparing yourself to others.
So I mean, so just looking at the small pool of South African music photographers we have, I feel that we're all incredibly supportive of each other, right? I mean, I might miss a moment, but at least someone else did, and it's a great image. I'm stoked to see that. I'm very happy that the moment was caught by someone, if not by me. And at the end of the day, everyone has their own style. As we start progressing, but I seldom see people watermarking their images now, especially people that have been doing this for a while. And straight out the gate, without knowing who's posted the image, I can say, oh, that is person X's photo, that's person Y's photo, just because I can see the style. I know how they shoot, the attention they shoot with. So yeah, that's also why the comparison falls flat a little bit. My black and white work can't compare with some of other photographers that work almost exclusively in black and white. And I don't even want to try, because honestly, it's not my niche, it's not my style. And that's why you can't draw that comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some interesting topics uncovering here. If you guys want to join, still have a big crowd, so drop some comments in the comment section and questions. So if you want us to elaborate on anything, if you want to ask Wayde directly a question, keep them coming, guys. Keep those questions in the comment section.
I'm surprised there's been no insults yet. I mean, typically that's what happens in these things. So
I think rather subdued for now, but let's hope they do arrive in a few mo's. Okay, let's go on with our slideshow.
Sure. Okay, this was also last year. So this is Hanu from the Narrow, who also made it onto the meme about jump scale. He was actually a little bit annoyed because he thinks he should have been rated higher. And to that point, he went and dug up images from 2005. He went into the archives last night and he was DMing me saying, listen, if this was in 2005, I would have won that contest hands down. But yeah, just going back to this, I mean, the Narrow for me was a band that I absolutely adored growing up as well. They've been icons, they're stalwarts in the South African music industry. So this was part of their 20th birthday celebration last year. So yeah, I was very privileged to go along and shoot, I think, 4 of the dates that they played. So that was also just incredible. So and I believe that's Railways in Cullinan, if I'm not mistaken. So the new railways to open up.
All right. So I think if people are going to see you from now on, they're going to just jump and see, trying to impress you, trying to work up that jumper meter.
Yep. We're gonna have to do a version 2 or version 3 of that video already.
Now looking forward to it. Yeah, it's great stuff. Yeah, having fun here on social media. It's great. Okay, so let's see if I have a question here. Yeah, so I'm just finding my little list here. Okay, so how do you go about dealing with anxiety and stress, if any, if you do have before a live performance? But yeah, if you have any tips and advice to share to people.
Okay, so I mean, starting back 8 years ago, there was minimal anxiety and minimal stress because you're starting out. So you know what, no one's really expecting much from you. You're aware that you're there to have fun, to learn, etc. So there isn't too much going on, and you know that the pit is filled with photographers that are far more skilled than you are. They're going to get the moments. There's no reliance on you. Stress and anxiety starts to creep in when you start getting hired by bands for particular performances. And yeah, occasionally it does creep in. Creeps in for big events like Francois and Frenda, because you don't want to mess that up. So often, I mean, if that's the case, I'll chat to Bianca and she'll be like, how many times have you shot events? You've shot hundreds of them. Like, you might miss a moment, but you'll capture another one. And there are going to be hundreds of moments worth capturing. So yeah, she tends to talk me down off the ledge. But for the most part, the stress and anxiety nowadays is few and far between. I tend to work with a lot of the same bands multiple times. So that familiarity does help. Knowing when they're going to do things, I can already visualize where I want to be. Do I want to be on stage to capture that moment? Do I want to be in the pit? Do I want to be near the crowd? Stage left, stage right, etc. Am I going to be dodging a bass guitar? Am I going to be dodging mic cable? The whole 9 yards. So by working with the same bands over and over again, you develop this mental image, and I spoke to that earlier on about knowing the set list backwards. So I can already visualize when the jumps are going to come. So that does remove some of the unpredictability, and I think it's that unpredictability that drives the anxiety slightly. So that's why if you look at things like Lift the Baby Dum, Francois and Frenda, them being more variety shows than full on, this is just an artist set list run from start to finish that you're used to, that's where the unpredictability comes back. That's when they're bringing in pyrotechnics, confetti, all these things. So Lift the Baby Dum, for instance, where are you going to shoot the confetti from? Oh, but shit, now the wind's blowing. Is the confetti going to go out? Is it going to come in? Is it going to go left? And these are all the things that you're trying to grapple with in the moment. So yeah, naturally before that all starts out, there is going to be some anxiety behind it. But yeah, Bianca will talk me down, and then once I get to the show, honestly, it's pure adrenaline. You go. There's no time for it. So yeah, you can either sit there and rock yourself in comforts to comfort, or you can just get on with it and let the adrenaline fuel you, which is ultimately what happens.
How much research do you do prior to a shoot? So maybe it's a new band. Don't much about the band. You actually go listen to them on Spotify or YouTube, buy a CD, try and gauge what everything is about, and yeah, take it from there.
Yeah, so a bit of listening, sure. Mostly what I tend to do though, especially, I mean, if it's a band I'm not familiar with, we're probably more likely talking about an international band then, right? I like to think I'm fairly well exposed to a lot of the South African acts and know what they're about. I might not know their full stage energy, but we can deal with that when we get to the venue. Internationals though, listening to the band is not going to be enough. So go pull up the set list that they've been playing on their tour, try and figure out what songs they're going to be playing, and then YouTube, see what they're doing on stage. And because they're probably going to keep a similar type of stage profile. If the artist is going to run off stage into the crowd, it's probably during the same song because he knows he's got time to do it in that song. So those are the types of things that I'll start looking for. That's the type of research I do. But yeah, Spotify might help get you into the band, because I also think that if you're into the music or enjoying what you're shooting, it reflects a lot more in your photos. And I can definitely see that not just only in my photos, but in other photographers' photos. If they're not enjoying the band they're shooting, I can see it. If they are enjoying it, I can also see that. It's not a well-kept secret. Your passion for the music also bleeds into
Yes.
what you generate. So yeah, getting yourself amped up is also, I guess, a form of preparation. So getting excited about a band coming out is absolutely essential.
Yeah, it's all forms of photography, in fact. If it's something that you stop enjoying, yeah, it's going to reflect in your images. And also this fake it till you make it mentality, trying to be a different person in front of
Mm.
others, it's also going to reflect badly in your images. So
Yeah.
that genuine passion, that
Mm.
to sound a little bit cheesy, the heart and soul of it, if you're genuinely into it, it's going to reflect in your work.
No, absolutely. And I've said to everyone, not everyone, metaphorically everyone, the minute I stop enjoying what I'm doing, since this is a passion project, this is a hobby, this isn't my day job, the minute I stop enjoying it, I'm going to put the camera away and be done with it. I don't want this to feel like a job. I want to feel appreciative that I get to do this every time I get to do this. I want to enjoy this every time I get to do this. And the minute that goes away, then I'm doing more of a disservice to anyone that I'm photographing. So
Makes sense. Yeah. It's the reason I stopped doing wedding photography. So I stopped wanting to be there. I decided, no, the wedding couple doesn't deserve this. I just
it's the reason I
quit
never
doing
started and
it.
never will start wedding photography.
Yeah, so my attention span is like 3 or 4 hours long. It's like when it goes beyond that, I want to be somewhere else. And it's just something I decided. Studio photography, should I say, is for me. It's fits my brain and my attention span a lot better.
Yeah, and you do it
All right,
incredibly well. So I mean, yeah, it's
thanks.
definitely your niche.
All right, slideshow. Let's progress.
Okay, so
Let's have
back
a look
to
here.
Lifter Beatty Dum. This was 2 years prior. Um, yeah, so one of the event organizers ran up and they decided Francois needed flares, and we got the smoke flare or smoke bombs, whatever you want to call them. And yeah, this is still one of my favorite images, just because I've never seen it before. We haven't seen it since. So yeah, truly a great moment.
Hmm.
Francois often gives me a lot of flack about it, and he says he doesn't know why I keep shooting him or his band, because I've already taken the best photo that I'm ever going to get of him. So why am I bothering? But yeah, no, I truly love this photo. This ended up in a couple of newspapers countrywide. So yeah, that's speaking back to the achievements. I think even just getting stuff into the general press nowadays as a freelancer, especially since press and print media is a dying medium, still feels like a bit of an achievement. So yeah, I'm still
Hmm.
very, very chuffed with this photo.
All right. So I have a follow-up question to something we touched on in the previous photo. All right. So you mentioned a love and a passion for your trade, and if you feel like it's becoming a job, you're going to put the camera down. So I have a couple of questions. Number one, have you ever felt close to that? Like this is becoming a little bit too overwhelming, or I don't like doing what I'm doing anymore. Have you ever touched there in that zone ever before? And second question is, have you ever, like, how do you maintain the love and the passion? Is it something that can be forced or not? I assume no.
So have I ever come close in the music genre or the music niche of photography? No. Um, I have tried other events, other types of things, and yeah, they haven't always been my favorite things to do. I and that's when I realized that my passion truly just lies in music and
Mm,
photographing music. So I think that just helps reinforce the narrative. And how do I keep it? Honestly, I don't have an answer to that because it's not something I've ever actively had to think about.
mm,
I drive around and listen to a lot of the bands, that I photograph quite often. The joy hasn't dwindled at all. So
mm,
there's seldom been a point, or there's never been a point where I've had to, I have to go shoot this band. What a chore. No,
mm.
it's never struck. No.
That's a good zone to be in then.
Mm. Even artists that fall outside of my niche, they perform in their own way, and it's interesting to watch and it's interesting to document.
Mm,
Granted, I might not want to follow them around and photograph them 50 times a year, but yeah, the once or twice a year that I do get to see them, they put on a different type of show and they perform in a different way. And that's the beauty about different genres as well. I mean, I know I do a lot more in the alternative space, but you look at things like Lift the Betty Dum and you're exposed to artists that I typically wouldn't come across. Um,
mm.
and they bring a different type of energy. They perform in a different way. I've never had a metal band bring backup dancers. Um,
Got an intro from Cameron here, so I had to drop this in.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That does keep the passion alive. Free entrance to gigs. Yeah. So that's actually I'll touch on that in a second. But yeah, just finishing up the lifter thing. I mean, you don't see metal bands, alternative acts with backup dancers or any of these types of things. So that's a whole different experience, and getting to document that's really great. Um, but yeah, the misnomer of free entrance. I mean, wow. Yes, very cool, absolutely. But if you look at the price of tickets sometimes, and then you weigh up the fact that, so this, I will shoot a show. If there's multiple bands, I'll shoot for like 4 hours or whatever,
Mm,
and I'll go home and immediately start editing. So you know, that's another 5 hours. I'm awake until 4 a.m., 5 a.m., or whatever the case may be. And then you weigh up how many hours you spent on this versus 100 Rand to enter the venue for just to go watch the show. So that's when you really query: is it the free entrance keeping the passion alive? No, it's not. If you're only doing it for the free entrance, then I think you're a masochist to a large degree.
All right, so I think this is our last photo.
Yeah, and this is one of maybe not the most inventive photo I've ever taken, but it's one of the proudest ones I've taken. So this is Seether, who I was hugely into. They were one of my biggest influences when I was, moving off the Linkin Park side of things, trying to get into. I wouldn't call Seether super heavy, but they're definitely a lot heavier than what like Seether or Linkin Park or POD would be. So getting to be their official photographer, getting to take this photo, I mean, that to me, I already mentioned earlier on, that was one of my achievements or feelings of achievement. So yeah, this to me felt iconic, and it's a moment I am glad. And this would be one of the first pictures I print and hang in the entrance hall. I've decided I'm taking the house back. I'm going to decorate it myself. This is going in the entrance hall.
How did you manage to get thousands of people to look at you at the same time? Like when I did wedding photography, when I had 10 people in front of me, it was like herding cats.
To be fair, it's the band that actually gets it to happen. They'll often grab the mic and be like, guys, we're going to take a photo with you. Like, please put your hands up, do whatever. So, I mean, it's not coming from me. No one's going to listen to me, but they are going to listen to the vocalist of a band. Because at the end of the day, they're there to see the band. They're not there to see me. They're not there to engage with me. I'm not even meant to be seen for most of the show, right? That's why you dress in all black. You're meant to blend in.
Yeah, I remember that. All right, end of our slideshow. Thank you so much, Wayde. I have a couple of questions more to ask, and a sneaky question I didn't give you any preparation towards.
Oh, no. Okay.
What advice, considering everything that's been mentioned tonight, what advice would you give yourself 8 years ago? Like, would you do anything different? What else would you instill?
I don't think I would do anything differently, if I'm honest. So, I mean, a lot of my advice comes from what I ended if I'm approached by a new photographer to the industry. I often offer advice that was something I used at the time. I try to learn from others as much as I could. I ask for criticism. I mean, Henry Engelbrecht, I still consider, even despite his passing, to be one of the best African photographers in the music scene that ever existed. And often when I was starting out, I'd send him photos and be like, dude, what do you think of these? And he'd send me honest feedback, so find feedback. And that's something I did. Being professional at all times, no matter how good, bad, or indifferent your photography may be, conduct yourself accordingly, right? If you get admitted backstage or get given any type of preferential treatment, you're allowed on stage. For the love of God, don't make a nuisance of yourself. I've seen people do that countless times, and you'll never see them at a show again because they'll never be readmitted back. So, no, I don't think there's anything I would have done differently in hindsight. I've enjoyed the ride ultimately, and that's something I can say with 100% confidence. So, yeah, 100% happy with the way things have panned out, and I'm happy to continue doing so. I think the only thing would probably be maybe not pushing myself to edit until 6 a.m. and then trying to get up and play golf or something, because that's just insane.
At least you're not procrastinating in terms of editing. It's getting it done right then and there. It's a problem many others have. It's editing in the pipeline, waiting and waiting and waiting. I'll do it tomorrow, type of thing.
But you can't do that in this industry.
Of course, yeah.
Smaller bands, you can probably get away with it, but your larger acts, especially your internationals, they've got so many shows in the pipeline that if you aren't getting them images almost immediately, they're already looking forward to the next show. They want to post some content, say, hey, thank you, venue X, Y, and Z. Thank you, crowd. We had a great time. Thank you. See you next time. And then they're off. That's it. So if you send them images 3 weeks down the line, they're unlikely to go, "Hey guys, yeah, remember when we played your venue like 3 weeks ago? Here's a few photos, thanks." No, it's not going to happen. They'll post a selfie before waiting and saying nothing. So yeah, the timing is essential.
Makes a lot of sense. Something you touched on was getting inspiration and advice from mentors as well. And something I thought about on World Photography Day, it was last weekend, how important we are to one another. And after doing a bunch of interviews with people, there's eight out eight out of 10 times somebody will say a photographer helped me out with advice or guidance, a camera or some kit lens that they passed me down. Yeah, it just puts everything into perspective how important we are to one another. You also mentioned in your industry that it's a fairly small one, but you guys help each other out. There's something that we just cannot forget. Like with our power and our influence, we can make or break somebody's not only day but entire career. So to be very careful with how we treat one another. As I said, we have the power to make someone's career or even break it.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I mean, that's why, I mean, one of the cardinal rules, actually, this is the first thing I tell people when they say, "How do I become a photographer in the industry?" And my first comment is always, don't be an arsehole. Because that's ultimately what it boils down to. If you treat everyone else well, and you try and abide by a certain rule of etiquette that everyone else in the pit lives by, odds are people are willing to help you out. You forgot a memory card, someone's going to help you out. They are going to help you out. If you're perceived to be someone that no one wants to be around, you're not going to have a good time because no one wants to be around you. So those type of people, they weed themselves out very quickly. And the rest that you're left behind with are a great bunch of people.
100%. Last question, Wayde. You ready?
I'm ready. I think. I don't know. Let's go. Let's try.
Nice, easy one. What advice would you give aspiring photographers / music photographers? So two-parted: photographers in general and music photographers specifically. So, guys, imagine yourself 8 years ago talking to that person. What advice would you give?
Okay, so we've just started with my cardinal rule of don't be an arsehole. So I think we've covered that one. Second one would obviously be practice. Practice. You go to as many shows as you can. You shoot as this speaks to both a photographer or a music photographer, right? You're not going to get better at any form of art without practice. So you need to shoot as much as possible. So in the music industry sense, that means going to as many shows as you humanly can get to. Shoot a wide variety of things until something clicks for you. In terms of normal photography, shoot 100 different things and find the thing that is your passion. You've already said you don't enjoy shooting a couple of different things. I don't enjoy shooting certain things. And even your wedding photographers will hate things shooting particular types of things. So we all find our different niche within photography. And I think anyone getting into photography has to find their niche. So that's essential. I think I mentioned being professional at all times. And I think this goes to both, particularly in the music side. You know what? If you're backstage, you're not there to pester people. You're not there to become best friends with the artists, especially if you're newer to the industry. They don't know you. Don't make yourself a nuisance. That's ultimately going to be it. And I think the final point would be, and we've touched on this already, is have fun. You know, very few of us are going to make a living out of photography. A lot of us do this out of just pure enjoyment, particularly in the music side of things, right? So again, if you're not having fun, why are you there? That's ultimately what it boils down to. Practice, find your niche, and have fun.
So normally during these lives, I try to help people out in terms of merchandising or potential merchandising. So you can imagine a Wayde Flowerday merchandise range of shirts and caps. So I think your slogan on your shirt should be, if you're not having fun, why are you there?
Yeah, I think that could work. Yeah, 100%. I'm going to print a couple and
Good,
start handing them out at shows.
Well done. Okay, thank you, Wayde. This was very, very insightful. Very articulate, very wise opinions. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for your insight and giving us a taste as to what Wayde Flowerday gets up to as far as event photography is concerned, and also showcasing and explaining some of your amazing photographs as well. We do appreciate it highly from our side, and we wish you the very best in the near future as well.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much, Conrad.
All right, so I think I'm going to give it 2 minutes. If you are still watching in YouTube and Facebook land, now's your opportunity to drop a question or two. If not, I think that's going to be it. A good night from our side. So, any shout outs from your side, Wayde? Any people that you want to thank?
I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant to do that because if you forget someone, you're going to be in trouble. So, let's just go with my wife,
all of the above, okay.
My family that have tolerated me, and every band that and every other photographer that I've worked with. They all know who they are, and I always enjoy working with every single one of them. So I'm not going to name any band in particular. I'm not going to name any photographers in particular because it's like I said, if I forget someone, someone's going to get upset. But I love you all, and thank you all for being so great.
All right, so yeah, it's pretty much just all of the above, everyone.
Yeah, let's go with that.
All right. Okay. So again, thank you from our side, Wayde. It was wonderful chatting to you, and yeah, best of luck to the future. To everybody who's still watching, the link tree in particular is posted in the comment section. So if you want to follow Wayde, please do go to that link tree and follow him on your preferred social media, be it Instagram, Facebook, or go to his website. Support the guy. He has some interesting photos to show us. And yeah, let's support one another and let's help this industry grow even more.
Absolutely. Thanks, Conrad.
All right, so that's going to be it from my side. Conrad, on behalf of CameraStuff, and yeah, good night and hope you have a pleasant night further. Cheers and good night. So it's sucky having the dual monitor, so I can't find my mouse cursor now. Oh, here we go.
That's what control's for, man. Push it on your keyboard, you'll find it.
Yeah. All right.